All right. So, welcome all of you guys who are just now joining us. Seems like we still have a few people trickling on in. Just want to say that we want to keep everyone on mute just so we give Mary an opportunity to talk, and that as we ask questions, we don't end up with everyone talking over each other. So, if you do have a question, there is a chat function. If you see at the bottom of your screen, there's a list of icons, and you can find the chat icon, click on that, and you will have a chat that pops up along the side of your screen. Feel free to enter your question there. We will be taking those questions throughout. And if, again, you can all keep yourselves on mute, it would be much appreciated. So why don't we just go ahead and kind of kick off here. Just to kind of start, we're going to take care of a few housekeeping items. Again, just try and keep yourself muted. And if you have a question, feel free to pop it into the chat. We'll be taking some of the questions that were pre-submitted. We got quite a few of them. So we probably won't be able to get to all of the questions, but rest assured, this will not be our last virtual town hall. Our next virtual town hall will be on April 23rd. So keep an eye on your inbox for that. We're going to have more information come out soon. And there will be plenty more opportunities to ask your questions. And so the other thing to tell you before we kind of kick this off is that a recording of this will be available. So if you need to hop off at any time, or you have friends or family who are interested but couldn't attend, we will have a recording that we make available to everyone probably tomorrow. So if you are not currently subscribed to our email newsletter, I would recommend doing that. You can do that at electmarymiller.com, and you'll receive it right to your inbox. So you'll be able to watch this recording there. All right, without any further ado, I want to introduce our candidate here, Ms. Mary Miller. Mary is running for mayor. She's lived in Baltimore for 34 years. She raised both of her sons here. She is a former Undersecretary for Domestic Finance. Wanted to make sure I got that right. And she was on the management team at T. Rowe Price. She is a very impressive woman. And without further ado, I will turn it over to her.
Thank you, Spencer, and thank you everyone for joining me here tonight. I hope all of you are safe and well. This is a very hard time for Baltimore. The coronavirus impact is growing. As of today, we have 638 identified cases in the city, and to date, 13 deaths. We still don't have adequate testing for our most vulnerable populations, and we know that they will bear the brunt of this. The state let us know today that African Americans are disproportionately impacted by the coronavirus. This morning, we learned that in the last 3 weeks, 25,000 Baltimore City residents filed for unemployment insurance, and that number is certain to grow from here. I think we're going to need to expect a double-digit unemployment rate at the end of the month. The federal government response on this has been very strong, with $2 trillion of assistance to individuals, to local governments, to healthcare providers, and to businesses. But it's taking time for those federal dollars to arrive, and I know how frustrating that is. It's why I've been arguing that we need a strong local response to bridge the gap. We need to make sure that our congressional delegation has all the facts about Baltimore, knows our story, and is going to bat for us. After all, Speaker Nancy Pelosi is from Baltimore. This morning, the Federal Reserve announced a $500 billion program to help state and local governments, and I hope as a city we're prepared to jump on that. There's no question that this recession is going to be brutal for Baltimore. But I think we should treat the crisis as the opportunity to come back stronger and to come back more equitably. Let's design a recovery plan for inclusive growth, one that's creative and purposeful in reaching all of the people in Baltimore that have been left behind. But most importantly, we need to develop that plan, and that's what I look forward to doing as mayor. Let me stop my remarks here by thanking everyone in Baltimore that's responding to this current crisis, whether it's our healthcare providers, our first responders in the police and fire departments, essential workers that still have to report to work. in places like grocery stores and pharmacies. And all the volunteers that are really stepping up here in Baltimore to help out. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And now I'm ready to take your questions. That's what this town hall is all about.
Great. So we'll start with some of our pre-submitted questions. And as I mentioned, if you guys have questions as we go forward, please feel free to drop them into the chat. We will be taking questions from there as well. But to begin, we'll start with one of our pre-submitted questions. Mary, the question says, do you envision a comprehensive neighborhood revitalization program wherein most of the forgotten and neglected neighborhoods will be restored? If so, what would such a plan look like?
Thank you. And I will say at the outset that I'm going to try and keep these answers short so we can do lots of questions in this hour. For comprehensive neighborhood development, I think we need to have a strategy where we're working much more closely with communities and finding points of leverage where we can get neighborhoods to group together in essential areas to work directly with the city. I like to call this plan greenlining, and it's a response to the historic redlining that defined neighborhoods in Baltimore that did not have access to credit or investment and lack so many opportunities today. This morning, I was reading a comprehensive plan for one area in Baltimore, the Johnston Square 2020 Vision Plan, and it just shows me how much creativity and ideas there are in communities. That's the way the city should work. Be a partner with the communities, help them develop their plans, execute on the plans, and do it with a greater sense of urgency.
Great. Our next question is, many residents in Baltimore feel that the high property taxes they pay aren't worth what they're getting in return from Baltimore City services. As a result, many people end up leaving the city. What do you think can be done to address this issue of flight?
That's a very big question, and there are lots of ways that I could respond, but I think I'm going to pick out just a few things. First of all, I think it's really critical that we invest in quality of life improvements and service delivery in Baltimore so people are getting the services they deserve and expect from being a taxpayer in the city. I also think over time it's important that we develop a responsible plan for lowering our property tax rate in the city. We need to do that to make Baltimore more competitive with the surrounding counties, but we also need to do it to make our tax structure more reliant on growth from job creation and more income in the city of Baltimore. And finally, we've got to make the investments in our public school system that will keep families in the city. We simply have to fund the Kerwin Commission recommendations and hold the mayor accountable for educational outcomes in Baltimore that will keep families in this city. There's more we could talk about, but I'd say those are the top three things on my mind when I get that question.
Absolutely. So how are you different from other candidates? Does your background in business and the federal government give you any unique skills needed for a mayor in this city?
I do think that my background gives me some unique skills that are really needed right now in Baltimore. I do have the national perspective from years of investing across this country and in the city of Baltimore. I have the experience from the federal government of seeing how government can work for people and how you can get things done. I ran some very large programs at the US Treasury that were really important in getting the country back on track after the financial crisis. And that's important right now because we are headed into a big storm here with the recession that we're already entering. And I think that experience and economic recovery will be very useful for Baltimore. Finally, I would just say that I have the background of managing some very large organizations, large budgets, building strong teams, and holding people accountable for good work. That's what I want to bring to Baltimore.
Definitely. So I'm going to jump over to the chat and take one of these questions. The question asks, how do you plan on bringing the community together? There is such division and a lack of trust.
That's a great question. I think particularly in the wake of the Freddie Gray unrest in 2015, we have not spent enough time bringing this city back together. It's a period of time where we've lost more population and we've not healed the rifts in our community. I think one way to do that is to help the police commissioner execute the consent decree that we're operating under from the US Department of Justice. It is the roadmap to rebuilding trust between community and the police. I see that as a priority for Baltimore. We cannot spend decades working on this. We need to make that a priority for the city to restore trust. But we also have to work on things like the equitable delivery of city services. It should not be the case that your zip code determines things as simple as trash collection or water billing, basic city services that everyone deserves to have done fairly. That's something that I think would help rebuilding trust across the community. And then finally, I would say in economic development, we have not driven our investments fairly across the city. And I want to build a plan that is going to drive investment across Baltimore in neighborhoods that have been left behind. Again, it is the plan that I call inclusive growth. There's a paper about this on my website if you'd like to read about it. But I think those are some of the ways that we can restore trust between citizens of Baltimore and their government.
Another question we have here in the chat from Chris is, can you share your vision for transportation investment?
I've been public in saying I think we need to take back more local control of public transportation in Baltimore, which is simply not working well enough in a city where 1/3 of our residents don't own a car. We have got to build a bus system that works on time, reliably, and efficiently. I've argued that we should consider a regional transportation system and take local control to Baltimore and the surrounding counties for our public transportation system. It is unusual for a state to run a local transportation system, which is the arrangement we have here in Baltimore. So I think our Department of Transportation in the city could step up and take more responsibility for making public transit work better in the city. But I think we may need a longer term solution that's a regional transportation authority. I also think that we can do more to make this a city that is bike friendly, pedestrian friendly, and a city that we can get around using new modes of transportation. So I'm eager to work on those problems and makes Baltimore a city that's working for everyone in terms of their mobility, their ability to get to work and to get to school every day.
Absolutely. So I'm going to move back and take a few more questions from our pre-submitted questions. The next one is, how would you reset the culture overall in city government?
From a cultural perspective, I want city employees to feel that it is a privilege to work for the citizens of Baltimore. The first thing that I would do, which is something I did in the public sector and the private sector, is to do a deep survey of city employees to understand their work experience, their concerns, and their ideas for making city government work better. This can always lead to improvements over time, and it is something that I would do regularly to make sure I'm taking the temperature of city employees and making sure that they understand how they will be held accountable for delivering good city services. At the same time, I want to make this an attractive place for people to work. I want to attract the best Baltimore talent to work in city government, and I want to give them a very exciting place to work.
In a city with 17,000 vacant housing units, there still is a lack of affordable housing. What will be done to help bring some of these units back into the fold and reduce housing costs?
To me, this is one of the greatest disconnects in Baltimore, that we have not been able to balance the supply of vacant housing with the demand for affordable housing in the city. We have such an opportunity here to use programs like Vacants to Value, which allows city-based developers to improve housing and to ask them to use the local workforce to do that, creating jobs along the way to begin to tackle this housing problem. But we need to do it at much greater scale than we have. We simply have not been able to meaningfully reduce the number of vacant houses in Baltimore, and that is such an asset in our city. We have beautiful historic homes in Baltimore that have been neglected in neighborhoods for decades. Here is our chance to really go after that, to give people the opportunity to have a job, to work on construction and improving these houses. At the same time, we're putting housing stock back in the hands of people that want to live in the city. I would love to advance a live and work in Baltimore program, and this housing problem would be front and center in that.
Absolutely. So the other day you said that we should look into tapping our rainy day fund. What specifically would you do?
This comes back to trying to bridge the temporary disruption in our local economy. The city has a budget stabilization reserve, which we call the rainy day fund, of about $140 million. I think we could tap that right now to try to get assistance to small businesses before we lose them. Federal aid is coming. This could be a fund that could be used to bridge that. The city can replenish its coffers. There's a lot of federal assistance now identified for state and local governments. I'm just saying, let's jump in quickly with a rapid local response, which, by the way, I'm seeing other cities across the country do, to make sure that we don't unnecessarily lose employers in the city and that we can keep and retain those jobs. I think that's critical.
So I'm going to take a few more questions from the chat now. Here's one in a similar vein from John. Are there any local resources available to help Baltimore small businesses and nonprofits participate in the SBA or public-private partnership assistance programs where certain banks are proving to be an impediment to making applications to the SBA?
There's a lot in that question. I'll say a couple things. One, the state of Maryland created 2 COVID-19 emergency programs. One is a loan program, one is a grant program. And I think that they are well positioned to help local businesses. Unfortunately, both are oversubscribed at the moment and the state has stopped taking new applications. I hope the state will decide to replenish those funds and put more dollars to work there. The second thing I would say is the federal government, again, has come to the rescue with a $350 billion Small Business Administration guaranteed loan program that is run through the private banking system. That was just brought up last week, and it's had a lot of introductory problems in terms of getting it going. And unfortunately, the banks weren't ready to do this. In Baltimore, we do not have many banks that are fully equipped to make SBA guaranteed loans. So you have to be approved by the SBA to make one of those loans. And I think there's a bit of a scramble to get local providers up to speed to do that. I believe the program will settle down. There's already a lot flowing through that, but it's not the easiest thing to navigate. And I think we could do more to provide resources and assistance to small businesses that are trying to tap that. So I think it's going to get easier. And in fact, I'm already hearing that the federal government may even put more dollars to work in that program. But right now, it's just hard to navigate. And I appreciate the difficulties some of the small businesses are having, particularly working with some of the local banks.
Another question we have here in the chat from Richard is, what are your thoughts on creating or enhancing job opportunities for the age group 24 to 55? Seems like there's an emphasis on opportunities for youth and for seniors, but not the middle group.
I believe the city can do a much better job of connecting workforce training and job-ready people to employers in Baltimore. I am so frustrated by hearing private employers say they can't find people to hire in Baltimore. I don't think the city itself has to directly do the training, but they need to be the quarterback that is coordinating that is matching employers with employees who need jobs. And there's some difficult populations in Baltimore. We have 20,000 people leaving our prison system every year. They need help reconnecting with family, community, and most importantly, with jobs. I'm really heartened that I see more employers being open to hiring someone with a criminal record. I think the city should be a champion for that. We should find ways to engage employers that are going to help people that have a hard time finding jobs and getting back in the workforce. But our goal in Baltimore needs to be aggressive job creation with a very strong economic development program. I would create a deputy mayor for economic development whose everyday job was to make sure those people that need work in the city are finding it. I think that's critical to our future, because if we can raise income in the city of Baltimore with living wage jobs and good benefits, we can begin to solve a lot of our problems. But this takes focus, and it takes the city playing the right role in, again, connecting people who need jobs with employers who need employees. We can do this. We can do it much better.
Speaking of a deputy mayor, I have a question here from Michelle that says, could you talk about how you will manage the city? Will you hire a city manager, or will all the department heads report directly to you?
I would go back to a strong deputy mayor model for the city of Baltimore. I don't think we have enough authority and accountability in the existing arrangements. So as a straw man, as a plan, what I proposed is we would have a deputy mayor for operations, which may be akin to what some people call a city manager. But this person would be responsible for running all city operations, whether it is water and sewer, whether it is transportation, whether it is basic delivery of services through the Department of Public Works. That's operations. That's a big job. And I want to see that done well. And I want to see it done equitably across the city. The second deputy mayor would be for economic development. I just mentioned that. I think that is critical to driving growth in Baltimore, protecting and growing our tax base. The third deputy mayor I envision is a deputy mayor for equity and inclusion. Every decision we're making as a city needs to be made through that lens to make sure that no one gets left behind and that we are over-investing in the areas that need it the most. And finally, I would have a deputy mayor for intergovernmental relations. Baltimore can simply not do this alone. We need someone whose job is solely focused on finding the federal dollars that Baltimore is eligible for, making sure that we're bringing those programs to our city, and working well with the state, making sure that all the ways we connect with the state on our budget are strong ones and that we're a good advocate for Baltimore.
Most certainly. So I am going to jump back to some of our pre-submitted questions to make sure we get through a few of those. The next question I have here is, African Americans and low-income residents will undoubtedly suffer more because of this pandemic. How can we promote education and job training programs to attract and create employment opportunities for city residents?
Well, we are already getting the evidence that sadly the African American community is disproportionately impacted by this pandemic, both the healthcare crisis and the economic crisis. We know in New York, for example, that Hispanic and African American residents are 2 times more likely to be impacted by the coronavirus. And we're just beginning to get that data here in Maryland from the state. So not only do we have a public health disparity, we also have an economic opportunity disparity in our city. One of the ways that we can get at this, and I think the question raised, is to invest more in career and technical education programs in our high schools. This is an area where I think we can do better, but we need to give youth the opportunities to have apprenticeships, to have internships, to be ready for a job when they leave high school, if they're not planning to go to college. We need to arm our youth, our high school students, with the best opportunities as they finish school. I think this is one of the greatest obligations we have as a city, to educate our youth and to give them the opportunities that they should have when they finish school.
What new actions do you propose to mitigate the environmental injustices carried by Baltimore's economically disadvantaged?
There's so many ways that I think we've created economic, environmental injustice in Baltimore. I'll mention a few. I think we have not held ourselves accountable for air quality goals in Baltimore. And I think that we need to pursue those much more aggressively. One of the solutions we need is a good answer for the Baltimore incinerator, the Bresco plant that's gotten a lot of attention. I want to find the best solution for that that is environmentally sensitive to improve air quality. I also think if we invest better in public transportation and create more jobs in the city for people who live in the city, we can become less reliant on cars and automobiles that create air quality issues. I think we can do more with clean water. I should have started by saying I think clean air and clean water are environmental rights that we need to deliver to our citizens. But we have good ideas about stormwater infrastructure that can make our inner harbor cleaner. I want to do more with that. I'm also personally very excited about tree canopy as a solution in Baltimore. If we can plant more trees across the city, not only is that aesthetically great, but we can lower temperature differentials across the city, which can range as much as 20 degrees on a hot day in the summer, which has important public health impacts. So I think those are some of the things I like to think about. I also like to think about helping our city agencies work together on some of these problems, like our health department and our housing department, to see whether we can get some synergy out of solving environmental issues.
Speaking of the role that transportation plays in environmentalism, Matt would like to know what the role of bike infrastructure would play in your infrastructure or in your transportation plan.
I think it's a really important avenue for transportation in Baltimore, and we have not completed a biking plan where bikers feel safe to go anywhere in Baltimore. There is a plan called Complete Streets that the city's been working on. I think we'll get a final plan this year. And I'm eager to see that, to see what can we do to complete the biking infrastructure and to make it safe to be a bicyclist in the city. Again, that comes back to improving air quality in the city and giving people different transportation options.
Mona Lisa would like to know if you would renegotiate the city's pilot program.
I would not break a contract that we've entered into, because I think that's a slippery slope in terms of all the contracts that the city has to honor. At the same time, I would go back to the nonprofits who signed the pilot agreement in 2016 and ask them for more help for solving our city's problems. I think that pilot agreement runs for 10 years. I think we'll have an opportunity to renegotiate when it is finished. But I think right now what we should be doing is working with some of those institutions and saying, how can we be better partners in Baltimore, and how can we ask more of you to help us solve our issues?
So another pre-submitted question we have here is, it's not 1980 anymore, and the allure of Harbor Place is gone. Good parks and waterfront access make a city dynamic, but millennials want experience-oriented activities, not shopping. How would you ignite interest in the harbor?
I think one of the great opportunities in front of us is to refurbish Harbor Place and bring it back to the prominence that it should be for Baltimore. I think it's directly tied into our public safety issues in Baltimore. We need to make sure that Harbor Place is a safe, enjoyable experience for families and tourists that come to Baltimore. But I would go back to our roots. I was here when Harbor Place opened in the early 1980s, and it was just amazing. I think one of the key distinguishing features were the local vendors that filled those pavilions. It should be a uniquely Baltimore experience. We should not be relying on chains and outside vendors. We should be making it a Baltimore experience. I think we do need to embrace the realities of changes in the retail shopping experience and pay attention to what your question mentioned, which is, what do millennials want? What sort of experience should we be providing through Harbor Place? But that is the front door to Baltimore. It should be a welcoming place for everyone in this city and tourists that want to come to Baltimore. I think it's a huge opportunity for the next mayor to help advance the refurbishment and reopening of Harbor Place.
There doesn't seem to be any urgency coming from City Hall. What would you do differently if you were elected mayor?
I agree with that statement. I often think that I wish we could attack our public safety problems, our addiction problems in Baltimore with the same urgency that we're bringing to the coronavirus pandemic right now. I think these things are emergencies, and I think we've become, if not complacent, we've become used to these things. And we need to bring a whole new level of urgency and engagement to solving these problems. But we also have to recognize the opportunity problems in Baltimore, as I've talked about. We need to bring a lot of urgency to that investment problem, to invest in people, to invest in education, to invest in jobs, so that we can really begin to bring the incidence of these problems down. It means we have to do a number of things at once. And that's, I think, incumbent on a good manager to hire good people, build strong teams, and drive an agenda of change very rapidly. We don't have time to waste on a lot of these problems.
How can we afford Kerwin when the economy has taken such a hard hit from COVID-19?
I don't know how we can not afford to do Kerwin. I think educating our children is one of the most important things that a city can do. I think we have a strong state delegation in Annapolis, and I think the city needs to work closely with them to find the most affordable solution for Baltimore to make the investments in Kerwin that we need to make. If you look at that plan, it's got all the essential elements of what we can do to get better outcomes for our students. So I would commit as mayor to finding the ways to pay for Kerwin and to make sure that we hold ourselves accountable for strong educational outcomes in the city. And that if we make that kind of investment, that we're seeing the kinds of change that we need to see to strengthen our public education system and give everyone the opportunity to thrive. I always say I think that our public education system should be everyone's first choice in Baltimore.
So I have a question from Christina here asking what your thoughts are on a $15 minimum wage.
I support a $15 minimum wage. I'm not even sure that that's high enough to enjoy a high quality of living in Baltimore, but we've got to get there. In January of this year, we moved to $11 an hour. It will step up each year until we get to $15 an hour. I wish we were there now. And I think that the kinds of jobs that I'm thinking about for Baltimore have to give people at least a $15 or higher hourly wage in order to be able to live a life of financial security in Baltimore.
Sandra says, one of the challenges with connecting potential employees with jobs is transportation. What are your thoughts on creating more options for transportation and/or working with employers to offer flex schedules?
I think both of those ideas are good ones. I've talked about creating stronger east-west bus lanes. We've seen that work in other cities where you take one street and make it a high-speed bus rapid transit system so that we can move people around the city more quickly. This is where I think the Department of Transportation could weigh in, because we know the local needs. We know the paths people need to take to get to work. We know where we have inefficiencies in the system. So I would try to, in the immediate term, improve the bus system in Baltimore to move people around more quickly and make sure that the routes make sense for the corridors people need to travel to get to work. I also think that we can do more with creative kinds of transportation, working with van services, shared ride services, using scooters to get people around the city. We just need to make sure that we're being much more creative in creating the capacity so that we're supporting that work infrastructure. I also talk to parents who would like to send their children to a different school in Baltimore, but they do not have confidence in the bus system today to get their child to school on time, and maybe even with several transfers involved. That's something that we should really take a hard look at to make sure we have a good transportation system for kids who are trying to get to school.
How will you address silos across city government agencies?
I would try to create incentives for cooperation and reward synergy wherever we can find it. I think that there are good examples where we might be able to get city agencies to work together. I've been talking to some housing and health experts where I think if we took the system of looking at unhealthy homes and making the sort of repairs and investments to make that a healthy home, and have the health department working with the housing department with recommendations, we might be able to get a much better outcome that is solving a number of problems at the same time. But I would reward that kind of behavior, and I would make sure everyone feels that we're all on the same team here. There is no benefit to competition across city agencies. We've got to find the best way to define our goals and to work together to solve these problems. And again, I come back to you reward the behavior that gives you that kind of synergy, that kind of cooperation.
Would you entertain putting together a kitchen cabinet of a group of people who want nothing from the city except to see it prosper?
I would welcome advice from people across the city. That sounds appealing. My only concern would be I would want to make sure that such a kitchen cabinet was representative of the city and that we had diverse perspectives and that I was getting all the information I needed. But I would commit to being a mayor that is very open to input and to listening to people about what their concerns are and listening to their advice on how I can do the best job as your mayor.
So I have a question here asking, should you, Theroux, and TJ combine forces in some way against a known name?
Wow. I would certainly welcome the support of TJ and Theroux for my candidacy. I think at this moment in Baltimore, we do need someone from outside the political system to step in and right this ship and deliver services that Baltimore deserves. I think that an outside perspective is particularly helpful right now in the wake of this economic and healthcare crisis. I think that the experience and breadth of work that I've done uniquely qualifies me for this moment. So I would love to work with other candidates. I'd love to bring that sort of support and synergy to this campaign and to the mayor's office.
In the same vein, I have a question here asking, there are many running for mayor that are competent, skilled, and from Baltimore. Would you be willing to encompass some of these individuals in your cabinet?
I think there's a very strong field of candidates in the mayoral race. I've also met candidates for other races in Baltimore, for city council, for example, and I think there's a lot of talent out there, so I would certainly be open to that. What I want to do is build the strongest possible team that is reflective of Baltimore's best talent and best experience, that we can bring a whole new face to this city and make sure that we've got broad, diverse representation and talent in Baltimore. This should just be the most exciting city to work for in the country.
I have a question here asking about property taxes. It says, Baltimore City has the highest property tax rate in the entire state of Maryland. What is your plan to restructure the property tax system and reduce property taxes?
The first thing that I would do is a comprehensive review of the city's tax structure, looking at how we raise revenue and how we give away revenue with numerous tax credits. I think the latter part is a problem because it makes people not trust the tax system if they feel that one party is getting an advantage that someone else is not getting. So we need to review all of the tax credits and incentives we provided for growth. I frequently say that I think we have over-preferenced real estate development at the expense of job creation in Baltimore. If we can create more jobs in Baltimore, we can raise income in the city and more revenue through the income tax. I'm not proposing raising the income tax rate. I'm proposing raising the income base in the city. If we can do that, I think that gives us the roadmap to reduce the property tax in Baltimore and make us less reliant on that. First, I think we have to look at the whole picture of how we're raising property taxes, where we're giving property taxes away, and come up with a sensible way to do that more fairly and equitably. But the bigger plan, the bigger game plan is let's raise revenue from income in Baltimore and become less reliant on the property tax so that we can bring it down and make Baltimore more competitive with other counties in the state and bring more development into Baltimore.
I have a question here that says, I see good restaurants that I really like closing. There are so many empty storefronts in my neighborhood. What can the government do to support these businesses?
I have been involved in a small business lending platform in Baltimore to help local entrepreneurs, particularly small businesses that are women and people of color, find access to credit to open and sustain these businesses. This sort of engine for growth is even more critical now because we will come out of this now recession weaker with a lot of small businesses that have closed or are barely hanging on. I think we need to make sure that we provide access to credit for small businesses to survive in the city. These businesses are critical to the employment base. They employ more than half of all workers in Baltimore. And I think that as a city, we should be helping, not just with the nonprofit lenders in the city, but encouraging our banks, our financial system, to provide more of what I call financial oxygen in Baltimore to help our businesses thrive. As mayor, I would be all over this one because I think this is key to growth in Baltimore, is making sure that we have a financial system that is hospitable to growth.
Richard would like to know, what would you do to make public housing residents feel that they are an equal part of Baltimore life?
I like to visit every corner of this city. And so one of the things I would do is I would sit down with public housing residents to ask them how they feel they're part of Baltimore and how they can be made to feel more part of Baltimore. But they are part of this great city. They have a huge role to play in making Baltimore a high quality place to live. I think that we just need to have open communication, and we have to have a mayor who is out there and about talking to people across the city. And we can make more opportunities available in terms of entertainment, in terms of cultural life, in terms of sharing events that everyone can take part in.
We have a question here in the chat that says, I know a lot of neighborhoods and streets look like dump sites or trash pickup never seems to come. Can you improve DPW service?
I hear this in every neighborhood association that I visit and talk to. It is completely unacceptable that some neighborhoods have regular trash pickup and others suffer with illegal dumping and with trash service that is not calibrated to the needs of the neighborhood. At a very high level, I would say we need to find ways to reduce trash production in Baltimore so that we are not producing as much waste. But I think in the immediate term, we need to make sure that areas that need more frequent trash collection and need more help dealing with problems like illegal dumping are getting that. So I would commit to taking a hard look at DPW's budget, at its practice, at its schedules, and particularly how we're working across the city, because I hear this everywhere I go and I know it's a priority to residents in Baltimore.
We have another question here in the chat from Chris, who says, if elected mayor, what would a successful Baltimore look like after 4 years?
To me, a successful Baltimore would be one that is growing at a pace that is above the average for the country. We have not done that for the last 10 years. And I think we need to really step on the gas here and make sure that we're making the sort of investments in this city that can help us all succeed. It will also be a city that has dramatically reduced violent crime, by giving the police commissioner the support and resources to succeed, by having a much stronger community policing plan in Baltimore, by investing in violence reduction initiatives, by helping our youth find better opportunities through education. We need to have higher quality of services in Baltimore and make people feel that living in the city is a great option. So if for 4 years from now, we could look at a list of things that we've accomplished together: reducing crime, improving employment, driving more investment in the city of Baltimore, making meaningful strides in our public education system, improving public transportation. I believe in setting strong goals, but I also believe in measuring those goals, and we haven't done enough of that. I think we need to define that agenda, and then we need to hold ourselves accountable that we're delivering on those measures.
Mary, with so many candidates in the race, whoever wins will likely win with a plurality. If that's you, how do you plan to unite the city under your leadership?
I'm trying to unite the city in my campaign. So as I move across the city and talk to people now, often virtually like this, I want to go into this primary with as much support across the city from the message that I'm delivering as I can. If I'm fortunate enough to win this primary, and I certainly hope to do so, I think that's the opportunity to reach out across the city to every constituency who may have voted for a different candidate to say, I want to work with you. I want to be a mayor that is going to be accessible, collaborative, and important to every single person in this city. That is critical. I think we need a mayor that's going to unify Baltimore, get us all on the same page, make us feel proud to live here, and lead the charge in bringing Baltimore back.
Mary, how would you combat food deserts?
This is a great question. We have about 25% of our population that does not have access to healthy food. In the short term, I think we should pursue remedies like mobile food units that we can send into neighborhoods and areas to give them the opportunity to buy healthy foods. I also think if we are improving our public transportation system, we'll give people better access to grocery stores, and maybe we need some special transportation service just for that. But longer term, I think we need to find ways to invest in food operations in neighborhoods that simply have not had that kind of investment. I toured one neighborhood recently where the grocery store has been closed for 20 years. That's just unacceptable. I am willing to explore nonprofit models, co-op models, for-profit models, but we're going to get grocery stores back in communities. One thought that I've had is to try and work with the city's public market structure and see whether there's a way to combine the commercial grocery store with the public market to get people the right mix of healthy and other, well, I don't want to say all groceries are unhealthy, but give people the shopping experience and the access they need to a full service grocery store at the same time they're getting the fresh fruits and vegetables that we can find through our public markets and our farmers markets. We also have an opportunity with vacant lots in Baltimore to do more with community gardening. And I think that's a great opportunity for neighborhoods.
Kind of shifting back to the economic development piece, Kaiser would like to know, what are your thoughts around leveraging our rich city resources to get companies to build their offices in Baltimore so we can supply better middle-class jobs for Baltimoreans?
That's right up my alley with an economic development plan for Baltimore. I think there are a number of parts to this. I want to be a city that is nurturing the companies that are here. I think we can do more on business retention with the employers that are already here, asking them what they need to grow and how can we help them grow in Baltimore. I think we should have a ready inventory of sites for companies that are interested in looking at Baltimore to come into the city and have a, a process where we're rolling out the red carpet to say, here are the sites that are available for locating. Here are all of the resources that we can bring to bear. I've seen other cities have much stronger economic development plans to bring investment into the city. Now, I have to be honest, I think that we have to solve our public safety issues before we will be a magnet for many companies to come to Baltimore. So I think in the short term, we should be working very hard on improving public safety in Baltimore, improving the image of the city, telling the story of Baltimore, what our attributes, advantages, and locational benefits are. But we also need to be a cheerleader for the city. I think that combination of things, a strong economic development program, improving the public safety and image of Baltimore, and then being that cheerleader, telling the story better would be the things I would focus on.
So Mary, we only have a few minutes left. This seems to be a question that everyone keeps asking, so maybe we can close on this. What kind of feedback are you getting on the campaign? What are you seeing in our internal polling, and how are you getting your message out across the city?
So we did a poll in early March, and I was really heartened to see that my name recognition had jumped significantly and that my message seemed to be resonating with people. The two responses we got were very favorable on message, and also, we don't know you well enough. So we have been working hard on the Get to Know Mary campaign with a lot of media, with a lot of reaching out to communities, to people across the city, to introduce myself, to tell my story, to explain what I want to do. And it seems to be working. So we'll just keep pressing on this front. We'll go all the way to the primary on June 2nd. And I think the resonance on this seems pretty positive to me. So we gained significant ground in the poll that we did in early March. We'll likely do another one at some point and see where we are. But to date, things seem to be going in a very good direction.
I think so too. And so just with our last few minutes here, I appreciate you all dropping your questions into the chat. I would like to encourage you with these last few minutes that we have to drop any more questions that you may have. As I mentioned at the top of the call, this will not be our last virtual town hall. We will continue to have these up through the primary on June 2nd. So we will take these questions. I will make sure to jot down anything that we did not get to today and try and include it in our questions in the future. I will also make sure that you all are kept up to date on what we are doing. Our next town hall will be on the 23rd. We're also going to be hosting we will not be hosting, but one of our volunteers has agreed to host a virtual meet and greet focused on arts and culture on the 17th. So if you are interested in that, please feel free to send us an email and we can get you that information. You can always reach us at info@electmarymiller.com. Mary is also live on Facebook every Tuesday at 1 p.m. to kind of provide a campaign update and let you know what we're doing. And so with that, I would just say, if you'd like to check out Mary's policy proposals, things that she's talked about in length, you can go to electmarymiller.com. You can also sign up for the email updates there, so you can receive all the information right to your inbox about what's going on and when future events like this will take place. And then you can also sign up to volunteer there. We are starting, actually we've already started our text and phone bank opportunities for at-home volunteering. Given that we're in the midst of kind of this unusual time, we have transitioned our volunteer opportunities to ones that you can do remotely. And so we would love to get you involved, but please, when you sign up on the website, be sure to include a mobile number. So Mary, I will turn it back to you to kind of close out, but thank you everyone. I appreciate you guys following along.
Thank you, Spencer, and thank you for the so many people who joined tonight. I do see that there's still a lot of people in the chat room that we didn't get to. I was trying to be as succinct as possible, but don't hesitate to send questions to our electmarymiller.com website. I'll try to answer you online if I haven't done so on the screen today. I will come back to the way I started, which is to say this is a very challenging time for our city. But we will get through it. I know we will get through it. I just want to make sure that we come out stronger on the other side with a sense of purpose and a sense that we really know where we're going as a city and what we need to do to solve our significant issues, but also recognize the significant promise of Baltimore. We all love this city, and we all want to see us do better. And I would be eager to help with that challenge. So thank you again for your attention and staying with this call. And I look forward to doing this again with you in a couple of weeks.
Yay.
Thank you.